I f***ed up. I wanted my last video to be extremely valuable to all of you, but I don't think I actually talked about the topics that really matter to you. For example, here we have Wayne, who asked, "Thank you for the video, how much the doctors paid for overtime?" I received a lot of questions on my YouTube video and also on my Discord community, which you should join, by the way, if you haven't joined already. We host every 2 weeks community calls where you can get all of your questions answered. Link in the description below. Now, let's get straight to the chase. There are 3 main parts that we're going to talk about today: the salary and work contracts, the contract terms, and also taxes. Now, to get started with the salary and work contracts. So the starting salary as a medical resident here really depends, like we mentioned on the previous video, on the city you work in, the hospital you work in, and so on and so forth. Now, I haven't quite found some accurate numbers that represent the starting salary for a medical resident here in Germany. However, from my experience, I know that most salaries range between 44,000 and 67,000 per year. And also you need to take in consideration that there's also some special bonuses regarding overtime, night shifts, and so on and so forth. So like I mentioned in the previous video, depending on your role in the hospital, so if you're like an Assistenzarzt or like an Oberarzt, Facharzt, you're going to have a specific salary. Also, depending on the years you're going to be spending in said hospital, the salary will increase annually. You can go and check out like the last video. I have posted some screenshots of how exactly the years work, but if you are too bored to go and do this, you can also Google the different medical tariffs in Germany. You can have specific tables where you can see how exactly your salary will vary and range throughout the years of your residency. Now, a lot of contracts here in Germany. You can do a full-time contract, a part-time contract. It really depends on what exactly the hospital needs and how you want to work. I have a few colleagues, and I know a few colleagues that prefer to work 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and they have like a different, let's say, contracts with the hospital. If you want to work full-time, you are going to expect to receive a contract between 40 and 42 hours per week, and in some cases you might even receive more. Now, with said contract, you are expected to work up until 48 hours per week. It is quite literally illegal for your employer to make you stay more than 48 hours in a hospital working, even though, as we all know, you're gonna have to do some overtimes. It is very illegal for you to stay more than 48 hours in the hospital, and you're gonna be instructed from your superiors to leave the hospital as quickly as possible. Now, usually before you sign a contract here in Germany, you will receive a small document called opt-in, opt-out, where upon signing, you basically agree that you are gonna be eligible to do overtime and also work up to 58 or 60 hours per week without you being able to exercise any legal actions for your stay there in the hospital and for your working hours. To put it into very simple terms, if you sign up a contract for 40 hours, this will be the minimum amount of time you're gonna have to spend in a hospital working. By signing the opt-in, opt-out document, you're basically agreeing that you can stay up to 60 hours per week in a form of like overtime and so on and so forth. But you need to also keep in mind that all of this overtime, you can also use it as a vacation day. So even though you are gonna be needed to work more, because this is normal, you're gonna be a medical resident, even though people don't want you to stay there at the hospital after your shift is over, sometimes you have to stay more than usual, but you don't need to think too much of it, because you know that this time you spend in the hospital after working hours is going to be compensated in one way or another. Now, moving on, like I mentioned before, there are different types of contracts. You can be basically full-time, part-time, and so on and so forth. Usually when you receive a contract, depending on the hospital and depending on where exactly you work in, you are expected to have, let's say, a contract between 3 to 5 years. Some say that the hospital is legally obliged to provide you with a 5-year contract to help you do all of your residency inside the hospital, but really it depends on where you go and what you want to do. Once you receive this nice contract and you sign it, you're gonna basically be entering a 6-month trial period called the Probezeit. Basically in this 6-month trial period, you see if this job is the right fit for you, and your employer sees if you can do the job properly without fucking things up tremendously. If you manage to survive this 6-month trial period, where I need to mention here that in some hospitals it's even 3 months, you basically receive a full contract. Now it is worth mentioning that you can quit your job contract whenever you want, and you can move to any hospital you want in Germany. It's very often that usually doctors here want to go to different hospitals to acquire, let's say, very specific, for example, type of education or expertise, or maybe they want to switch up the residency and do something completely different. So terminating your contract is actually something quite common here. Now, depending on the time you have this contract, you need to give a termination notice. Like you see here, if it's less than 1 year, you need to give it like 1 month before you leave the workplace or you want to leave the workplace. If it's 1 to 5 years, it's 6 weeks. And if it's more than 5 years, it's usually 3 months. Now, in every contract, you also have vacation days. As of 2025, every medical resident is obligated to do up to 30 days of vacation per year. And depending on your overtime and also on your night shifts, you can get a few extra days. In addition, you're also able to have a sick leave for up to 6 weeks from work with your full salary, and then up to 70% by insurance for 72 weeks. If you also are a parent and you have a child that needs your attention, you can also have up to 10 days per child, and in total up to 25 days. We also received a comment from writer Zik, who asked, what are the key reasons an international medical graduate might choose to pursue a medical career in Germany over the United States? I feel like the big key difference between Germany and Europe, I'm going to say in general, and the United States is that we have a very strong legal framework here that supports employees and protects them from overtime, burnout, and so on and so forth. I'm going to touch a bit more on this topic later, but as you see here, once you sign a contract, you have a very attractive pay, and you can basically have vacation and sick leave while being protected by the law. Your employer cannot kick you out of the work, and your employer cannot pick the next medical resident because you decided to do a vacation or because you called in sick for a week or two, which is something completely different from the US, since the US has a very intense work culture. I also received a very good question from the Discord community from a person called Zoe. So I'm going to touch on another video in the next couple of weeks, where she basically asks how I've developed this mindset, and I really want to touch this topic, especially on the work culture and the differences between US and Germany and why I decided to come here. Now, another topic that everyone wants to know about is taxes. Now, Germany has very high taxes for singles and lower for married couples. Usually there are 6 tax classes: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Depending on if you're single, married, or with kids, you are placed in different tax classes. Now, most likely, if you're single and you come to Germany to work as a medical doctor, you're going to be paying a lot of money in taxes. So, for example, at this moment of time, I'm paying a lot of taxes, a bit over 40%. If you're married or if you have kids, once you come here and you register, you can be in a much lower tax bracket than me. What you also need to keep in mind is that if you're married with a non-working spouse, this can also significantly lower your taxes. So keep that in mind. Now, when we talk about taxes, we talk about a wide variety of taxes. I create here a pyramid-looking structure. I don't know if it looks like a pyramid, but anyway. Now I want to demonstrate how exactly this looks like. So the most important one here is the Ärzte Versorgung, in my opinion. This is basically the replacement for the Deutsche Versicherung. So imagine that as a doctor, you don't actually need to pay money to a public pension fund. However, you need to pay money for a medical or like a doctor pension fund, which in some ways you have a lot more benefits than the public pension fund. Now, in addition, you also have to pay an occupational accident insurance, which means that if you have an accident while working, this can basically cover your costs. You also have like unemployment insurance, health insurance, and also Pflegeversicherung. So what are these 5 things exactly? If you're a physician, so like a medical doctor, we have our own pension fund, not the Deutsche Renteversicherung. And basically you pay every month 9.3% to said fund, and also you get an extra 9.3% contributed from your employer. Now, if you keep paying this for the rest of your life until you're 62, you can pay out. You can basically go into retirement. Now, for the occupational accident insurance, if you, for example, you have any issue, like work-related accidents, diseases, and so on and so forth, your employer pays 1.6%, and you also have like a coverage, for example, in the form of like an unlimited physiotherapy. Now, you also pay for an unemployment insurance. This means that after you start working, if an issue comes up and you cannot go to work anymore, with this type of insurance, you can go to like a job center here in Germany and you can acquire 60% of your net salary per month for up until a year, I think. What you're basically paying is that you have the safety that if something goes wrong and you need to be unemployed for a while, you're going to get money out of it. Now, moving on, we also have the health insurance. 50% of it is covered from your employer. The other 50% you need to pay. And there are usually 2 types of insurances that you can choose, either a public one or a private one. Now, usually once you come to Germany, you're going to be on the public one, because for you to go into the private health insurance, you need to have a specific amount of salary. And you need to prove that you're making, I think, a bit more than 67,000 euros in order for you to be eligible to acquire a private insurance. Now, you need to know here that once you go into the private insurance, it's going to be almost impossible for you in the upcoming years to switch back to the public insurance. So if you decide to go to a much higher quality and also a bit more expensive health insurance choice, you need to keep that in mind. And lastly, we have the Pflegeversicherung, which is basically a long-term social insurance that you need to pay. And depending on if you have kids or not, you need to pay a specific percentage of your salary. And now lastly, there are also other costs once you start working here in Germany as a medical doctor. For example, you need to pay every year to your Ärztekammer membership fees, which vary from 270 to 378 euros per year. You also need to pay hospital liability insurance, which is around 40 euros a year. You also need to pay an additional private liability insurance, but this is optional for some cases. It goes around 55 euros a year. And also something that I really recommend you to you because it's not properly covered by other forms of insurances, a private disability insurance, which is around 100 euros a month. And yeah, that's it. I feel like this is a very detailed video on what you need to expect when you want to come to Germany in terms of your contracts, how your contract functions, what you can do, what you cannot do, how many taxes you need to pay, and also how the system is structured here in Germany. Now, there are a lot of other things that I haven't touched here, but these are like the basic concepts you need to understand if you want to start working as a medical doctor here in Germany. So before I close the video, I just want to say a big thank you for 800 subscribers. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe and also join the Discord community server. I'm going to leave in the description below the links for the Discord community and also for the financial guide for you to go through by yourself. If you have any questions or any video recommendations, be sure to comment them down below, and we're going to see each other in the next video. Bye.